I never thought the end of a 26-year career would come with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Joanna, we've decided to restructure our senior leadership. Today will be your last day. The words echoed off the glass walls of the downtown Chicago boardroom, as sterile and cold as the minimalist decor. Across from me sat Nathan Caldwell, the firm's newly minted managing director, hired less than a year ago. He slid a manila folder across the polished table with practiced detachment. "I've given this company my life," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. "It's a business decision," he replied, his tone flat. "Nothing personal." Nothing personal. That phrase hit harder than any accusation could. I was 59 years old, the oldest executive at Linfield and Grayson Consulting. I'd been here since the company's humble beginnings, back when our office fit inside a converted bakery and our first clients were local manufacturers trying to modernize. Now I was being dismissed like outdated software, and Nathan, with his Ivy League degree and obsession with efficiency charts, had the audacity to call it progress. Janet from HR sat nearby, avoiding my gaze. "You'll receive 3-month severance and health coverage through September," she offered gently. The protocol they followed? I'd written that protocol 12 years ago. My name is Joanna Lane, and 10 minutes ago, I was the Senior Director of Client Strategy at Linfield and Grayson. I wasn't just a title on an org chart. I was the bridge between this firm and the clients who kept our lights on. I remembered their kids' names, their anniversaries, the way they took their coffee before a big pitch. In a world full of transactional business, I built relationships that felt human. But relationships, it seems, had become a liability. As I packed my things under the watchful eye of security, I felt more numb than angry. The Crystal Award I'd received on my 20th work anniversary. The thank you card from the Aldridge family after we helped save their firm. Photos with clients at charity events, each framed moment now a relic of a past no one here seemed to care about. My phone buzzed. A text from our largest client, Grace Whitman of Whitman Healthcare. "Heard about some changes. Tell me it's not true. Call me." Nathan thought he could reassign relationships like files in a cabinet, but he didn't understand what he was tampering with. And I wasn't going to tell him. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way. When did loyalty stop being a virtue and become a vulnerability? In a world obsessed with innovation and youth, what happens to the wisdom that built the very foundations of success? 3 days had passed since I'd walked out of Linfield and Grayson with a cardboard box and a severance folder. The silence in my apartment felt louder than the chaos I'd left behind. My calendar, once packed with client calls, executive briefings, and quarterly reviews, was suddenly blank. I sat at my kitchen table with a job board open on my laptop and a pit in my stomach. Then the landline rang. "Joanna, it's Arthur." The voice on the other end stopped me cold. Arthur Blackwood, founder of Linfield and Grayson, my first boss. The man who once told me relationships were the heartbeat of our firm. I hadn't heard from him since he'd left for Brussels to meet with investors. "I just landed," he said, his British accent strained. "And I heard what happened. That decision was made without my consent." "Still, it happened," I said evenly. "Nathan told me all partners were consulted." There was a pause. "They waited until I was out of the country, claimed it was urgent to meet Q2 projections. I'm furious, Joanna." Furious didn't undo what had already been done. "I want to make this right," he said. "Your dismissal was never authorized." I stared at the framed thank you note on my desk, from a client I'd supported through a hostile takeover. "Nathan made it clear I'm legacy overhead, Arthur. They saw me as a line item to cut." "I never would have allowed that," he said. "You built this firm's reputation." "And now they're gambling with it." Arthur exhaled slowly. "Clients are calling, Grace Whitman for one. She's demanding an explanation." "She already texted me," I said. "So did Douglas from Argent and Belinda at Summit. I haven't reached out to a single one of them. But they're talking." You're not replaceable, Joanna. You never were. Then why didn't anyone act like it? I ended the call before he could answer. Moments later, the phone rang again. It was Grace. Tell me it's not true, she said without a greeting. I'm afraid it is, I replied. They called it restructuring. I've worked with you for 12 years. Melissa Bennett emailed me this morning. She's apparently my new point of contact. That woman once tried to explain my own distribution model to me in a meeting. I nearly walked out. She's capable, I offered carefully. Save it. I don't want capable. I want you. I didn't respond. Grace took a breath. When you decide where you're going next, call me. Our renewal with Linfield is up next month. I'll go wherever you land. One by one, the calls came in. 11 clients by the end of the day. None of them I'd contacted. None of them I'd solicited. But loyalty, it seemed, wasn't something you could cut from a budget. I hadn't asked for a revolt, but it was beginning. I didn't answer my phone the next morning. I didn't have to. The emails came instead, subject lines like coffee, exploring opportunities, and let's talk. They weren't from colleagues. They were from competitors. Quiet observers I'd crossed paths with at industry panels, client dinners, and networking retreats. People who'd once been polite, even distant. Now they wanted meetings. One email stood out, from Catherine Goldstein. Subject, transitioning thoughtfully, Joanna. Heard what happened at L&G. 3 firms want to meet with you. One is preparing a custom role. Let's talk over dinner. No pressure, just possibilities. CG Catherine Goldstein was no ordinary recruiter. She was the person you called when you needed a rainmaker, someone with a client portfolio that could turn tides. If she was reaching out, the industry was watching, and fast. We met at Delacorte on Wabash, one of those sleek downtown restaurants where deals are brokered over scallops and strategy. You're the talk of Chicago's consulting world, Catherine said, setting her wineglass down. Nathan Caldwell made a catastrophic error. I raised an eyebrow. Perhaps, she smirked. Ever the diplomat. That's part of your value, Joanna. You don't burn bridges. You light new ones. She slid a folder across the table. 3 offers. One from Lexington and Hart. They're opening a Midwest office and want you to lead it. One from Mayfield Partners. They're offering EVP of Client Development, fully remote. The third, she tapped the folder. Blackwell Consulting, mid-sized, private, human-centered. They want you bad. I opened to the Blackwell page. The compensation figure made me blink. It was nearly double what I'd made at Linfield. And then there it was. Equity. A full partnership track. They're not just paying for your experience, Catherine said, reading my face. They're paying for your phone book, your reputation, your trust capital. That's not easily transferable. It wasn't lost on me that just days earlier, I'd been deemed too expensive to keep. Now, firms were willing to bet millions on the very same asset Linfield had thrown away. Why now? I asked. Why all this interest so quickly? Because relationships don't scale, Catherine replied. Technology can replace processes. I can handle analysis. But what you have, that lived trust, can't be replicated. When you left, it wasn't just a personnel change. It was a signal. And what exactly did it signal? That Linfield and Grayson no longer understood its own value proposition. I sat back, letting her words settle. Catherine leaned in. Joanna, this isn't revenge. It's realignment. She was right. I wasn't interested in vengeance, but I was interested in building again. This time on my terms. That night, I reviewed the offers in silence. Lexington's was bold, ambitious. Mayfield's was safe, flexible. But Blackwell? Blackwell felt familiar in the best way. It reminded me of Linfield back when Arthur still walked the floor every morning, back when clients were people, not percentages. Before I could finalize my decision, Arthur called again. Joanna, I need to see you, he said. Privately. The board's in chaos. We've had 6 clients threaten to pull out, and Grace Whitman is demanding a meeting with the entire executive team. It's spiraling. I'm not surprised, I said softly. I want to bring you back. I blinked. Excuse me? As a full equity partner, title, control, we'll create a new division focused entirely on client retention. You'll report directly to me, no Nathan. It was everything I'd once dreamed of. Recognition, authority, and autonomy. Too perfect. Too late. What aren't you telling me? I asked. There was a pause. Nathan's maneuvering to push me into early retirement. He's consolidated backing from the new partners. If more clients leave, he'll have the votes. I need leverage. I need you. And there it was. I wasn't the solution. I was the shield. I'm sorry, Arthur, I said, but I have meetings scheduled with other firms. Good firms. You built this place, he said, his voice tightening. You're part of its DNA. Then it never should have turned on me. I hung up and opened the Blackwell folder again. Steady values, clear leadership, and one line written in ink across the bottom of the offer letter, added by the CEO herself. We don't need to be the biggest, just the most trusted. That was the firm I could build with, and I knew just what to ask for in return. The invitation arrived less than 24 hours later. Lunch with Arthur Blackwood, at the Harvest Club, the kind of place where handshakes sealed mergers and champagne softened betrayals. I didn't want to go, but curiosity outweighed my resentment. I needed to hear what he wasn't saying. When I arrived, Arthur was already seated, looking older than I remembered. His suit was pressed, but the light in his eyes had dimmed. Joanna, he said, rising to greet me. Thank you for coming. I nodded and sat down, guarded but polite. I've been trying to fix this, he began, skipping pleasantries. But Nathan's blocked every attempt. He's convinced the board that your departure was necessary to modernize the firm. And how's that modernization going? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Arthur sighed. Not well. Catherine Whitman has demanded an emergency meeting with the executive team. Argent Pharma is shopping for new consultants, and 3 smaller clients have already issued termination notices. I stirred my water. Sounds like the consequences are catching up. That's why I asked to meet, he said, leaning forward. I want to offer you a new role. Chief Client Officer. You'll report directly to me, no one else. I'll triple your autonomy and your pay. It was exactly the position I'd earned years ago, but was never offered. The very role I used to fantasize about while sitting silently in meetings, watching junior men present ideas I'd originated. Too perfect. I studied him, watched how his hands fidgeted with the linen napkin. What aren't you telling me, Arthur? He faltered, then glanced out the window as if the answer might appear in the falling snow outside. Nathan wants me out, he finally admitted. He's built alliances with the younger partners. If we lose another major client, he'll have the votes to force my retirement. There it was. The truth. You're not trying to bring me back to save the firm, I said. You're trying to save yourself. His eyes met mine, tired and cornered. We both know what this firm was, what it stood for. It can be that again? I shook my head slowly. No, Arthur. That version of Linfield and Grayson doesn't exist anymore. You let it die the moment you allowed Nathan to sideline me. You watched the culture change and stayed silent. Because I was trying to hold it together? You were trying to hold on to control. His jaw clenched. And what are you doing now, Joanna? Playing both sides? I smiled coldly. I'm choosing a side for the first time in years. Mine. He stiffened. You'd walk away from everything you helped build? I'm not walking away, I said evenly. I'm walking towards something that values what I bring. Not just my skills or connections, but my principles. His face fell. You've already decided, haven't you? I have meetings with Blackwell tomorrow, I replied. They've offered me equity, leadership, a voice. Arthur looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. This firm was your legacy. No, I corrected. My legacy is how I made people feel, the trust I earned, the standards I upheld. That legacy will follow me, whether this firm exists or not. We sat in silence as our entrees arrived. The conversation was over, even if the meal wasn't. Later that evening, I stood by my window, watching the lights of downtown Chicago flicker like scattered stars. My phone buzzed again. Another client. Another message. Wherever you go, we'll follow. I thought about what I would face if I returned. The colleagues who'd watched me escorted out without a word. The board that signed off on my removal. The systems that had quietly begun erasing my name from client files. Even with the right title and power, I'd still be trying to clean up a mess someone else created, with people who never really had my back. But Blackwell, they didn't just offer me a seat. They'd offered me a table, and I intended to take it. At precisely 8:45 a.m. the following Monday, I walked into the offices of Linfield and Grayson for the first time since my termination. Ms. Lane? The receptionist blinked, nearly dropping her coffee. Are you here for the all-hands meeting? I am, I replied, calm and direct. Arthur's expecting me. The tension in the building was thick enough to taste. Staff passed by whispering, heads turning, eyes darting away the moment I met their gaze. It wasn't fear, it was uncertainty. No one knew what this morning would bring. I, however, did. The conference room was packed. Every seat was filled, junior associates lined the walls, and a few remote partners had flown in just for the occasion. Arthur stood at the head of the table, flanked by members of the board. One chair was conspicuously empty. Nathan Caldwell's. Arthur cleared his throat as I took my place near the door. Whispers rippled across the room like wind brushing tall grass. Thank you all for coming, Arthur began, his voice steady but tight. As many of you are aware, recent staffing decisions have led to significant client concerns. Some of our most valued accounts have paused or canceled renewals, and several key relationships have been put at risk. He paused, then looked directly at me. I'm pleased to announce that Joanna Lane has agreed to return to Linfield and Grayson as a full equity partner and will lead a newly formed client relations division. Gasps. A few murmurs of relief. Some confusion. I watched the shift happen in real time, shoulders relaxing, guarded faces turning hopeful. Arthur raised his hand to settle the room. Additionally, the board has voted unanimously to remove Nathan Caldwell as managing director, effective immediately. His vision, while bold, has proven inconsistent with the core values of our firm. The silence was seismic, and for a long moment, no one moved. Then Arthur gestured toward me. Joanna, would you like to say a few words? I stepped forward slowly, locking eyes with Thomas, my former assistant, who gave me a subtle nod from the back of the room. His support was the only one I had counted on. Thank you, Arthur, I said, my voice clear and composed. But I must correct a misunderstanding. A flicker of concern spread across the board members' faces. I'm not returning to Linfield and Grayson, I said. I'm here to announce that I've accepted a full partnership at Blackwell Consulting, and as of this morning, Blackwell has finalized an acquisition deal with Horizon Capital. A beat of silence. Then chaos. Voices clashed, chairs scraped back. I saw a junior partner stand, then sit down again. Arthur looked pale. A board member whispered urgently in his ear. I continued without flinching. Blackwell now holds a controlling interest in Linfield and Grayson. The transition will begin next week. There are no planned layoffs, unless further restructuring is required for operational efficiency. Arthur stepped forward, stunned. Joanna, what have you done? I didn't do anything, Arthur, I said calmly. You did. You let a firm built on trust become a machine obsessed with quarterly metrics. Horizon Capital saw the instability and made a strategic decision. It's not personal. He shook his head slowly, realization sinking in. You orchestrated this. No, I said firmly. I just knew my worth. And I aligned with people who saw it too. The meeting dissolved into panic as I exited. I didn't linger to listen. I'd done what I came to do. By noon, the Boston Business Review had broken the headline: Blackwell acquires Linfield and Grayson in historic turnaround. Follows client revolt. My name was mentioned only once, near the end of the article. Joanna Lane, former senior director, has accepted a partnership at Blackwell and will oversee client integration between both firms. It was clinical, understated, but everyone in the industry knew what it really meant. By week's end, I was leading integration teams from my new office at Blackwell's Chicago headquarters. Staff from Linfield began reaching out, some seeking reassurance, others suddenly remembering they'd always supported me. I offered stability where I could. I wasn't interested in punishing anyone. That wasn't my goal. Still, the irony lingered. I had once been escorted out as a liability. Now I was leading the future they never saw coming. 6 months after the acquisition, Blackwell Lane Consulting, yes, they added my name to the masthead, occupied 2 gleaming floors in a downtown Chicago tower. The integration of Linfield and Grayson's client base had gone smoother than anyone expected. We retained 95% of the clients that mattered. Even the 3 who left in the initial fallout quietly returned, citing a refreshing return to professionalism. I sat in my new corner office reviewing quarterly figures. Revenue was up 23% year over year. Client satisfaction scores had never been higher. More than numbers, it was the culture that had shifted. A culture I had helped shape. There were no speeches, no grand moment of redemption, just steady, earned authority. Dominic Caldwell, now a name nobody wanted to utter, had resurfaced at a much smaller firm in St. Louis. His reputation had taken a hit it would never recover from. And Arthur? He accepted the advisory role I offered through gritted teeth. Our meetings were infrequent, professional, and painfully cordial. 1 week after the transition, he sat across from me in the very office where I'd once been dismissed like yesterday's news. "You control everything now," he said flatly. "No," I corrected. "I influence things, there's a difference." He glanced at the organizational chart in front of him, the one I had redesigned. "You kept most of the original staff." "They weren't the problem," I said. "The leadership culture was." Arthur looked down. "I let the firm drift. I thought growth meant more clients, more revenue." "You forgot it also meant more people to protect, more values to uphold." He nodded slowly, his defeat quiet but complete. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "we build something better." And we did. Clients began referring others. Staff who once felt invisible were now invited to strategy sessions. Junior associates were mentored rather than managed. Our weekly leadership meetings ended with one question: "Who did you help this week?" I never raised my voice. I didn't have to, because respect, once lost, is hard won. But when earned again, it carries more weight than authority ever could. One crisp fall afternoon, as golden leaves swept across Michigan Avenue, my assistant knocked. "Ms. Winters is here." I stood as Grace Whitman entered, graceful as ever in a charcoal suit and navy heels. "Congratulations," she said, smiling as she handed me a bottle of vintage Pinot. "You've built something extraordinary. The industry's still buzzing." "It's not a takeover," I replied with a smile. "It's a course correction." She chuckled. "Call it what you want, Joanna, but you've proven what I've always believed." "And what's that?" "In this business, systems matter, strategy matters. But in the end, it's the relationships that carry us. That's what you brought back." As we headed to lunch, I paused for a moment, looking out over the city skyline. 6 months ago, I had been treated like a relic, a line item, disposable. Now I was building something rooted in what had always mattered: trust, loyalty, and quiet leadership. I didn't seek revenge. But justice? Justice found me all the same. Joanna Lane's journey reminds us that loyalty, once considered a cornerstone of professional and personal relationships, is no longer guaranteed in modern institutions. After 26 years of service, she was discarded, not because she failed, but because others failed to see her true value. Yet instead of seeking revenge, she chose dignity, clarity, and quiet strength. Her story is a powerful lesson for anyone who has ever been underestimated or replaced after years of dedication. For older adults, especially those who have spent decades building careers, families, or communities, Joanna's story affirms a deeper truth. Your worth isn't tied to your title. It lives in the trust you've built, the people you've impacted, and the values you uphold. In a world that moves fast and forgets easily, don't let others define when your relevance ends. Sometimes the most meaningful victories come not from fighting back, but from walking away and building something better. Because real power isn't about reclaiming a seat at the old table, it's about creating your own.